Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I call this meeting of the House Public Safety, Homeland Security Committee into order. We only have one bill for discussion purposes today, Senate Bill 101 by Senator Ginn. Would you like to stand or would you like to sit, Senator? And let me put everybody on notice. Senator Ginn is selling raffle tickets to the Madison County Rotary Club at $100 a pop. I would caution you about buying these because I think they might go in. I think there's a strong possibility it may go into his campaign account.
What's in the raffle?
Alan's got a ticket. He's a winner.
$10,000.
Oh, spend $100 to win 10?
That's right. Senator, welcome to the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have had a little bit of discussion in the past several weeks about some of these Second Amendment right issues, so we certainly look forward to hearing your take on this.
Yeah, great to be with you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I appreciate y'all having me. I have here Senate Bill 101, and you know, I guess when I go back to my college days, 101 was always the kind of the basic fundamentals, and this is one of those basic fundamental Second Amendment rights that we carry. And I think this bill does several very good things to protect the rights of our citizens in the state and to work with some of our surrounding states. I've been working this past summer with the National Rifle Association and some other groups to try to get better reciprocity across our country and what we do. And you know, it's kind of funny as we travel around, we can drive in all 50 states with our driver's license, but our carry permits aren't recognized in all 50 states. And that's one of the initiatives that we're trying to do here. Currently, one of the states that adjoins us, South Carolina, doesn't recognize our carry permit. Well, I guess I'm a Southerner and like to be a little hospitable, so we're going to show up at the door with an apple pie. One of the sections in the bill here says that, hey, if they're a law-abiding citizen that has a carry permit in their state, we're going to recognize it in Georgia. In the effort that we can get that nationwide carry permit through the process. When you look at the bill, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of talk about what this bill does and doesn't do. One of the things that I've been working, and I'll just go through it section by section, but in Section 1, you get a lot of the same verbiage about what's going on in public housing. And what we want to make sure is there's not been any that I'm aware of in Georgia, but they're across the country. I believe there have been a couple housing locations where they have taken some of their tenants to court to try to take away their Second Amendment rights. So if you look on lines 85 through 87, the only thing that we want to do is make sure that, you know, there's no prohibition or restriction for a legal Georgia citizen to have a firearm that lives in public housing. And, you know, one of the things when we look at public housing, there are a lot of great folks. I've managed local government for 20 years. I've managed the areas that we had 9 housing projects in one of the communities I did, and there's a lot of great people that live there. As you know, crime is one of those things that doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care where it goes sometimes, but we want to make sure we're protecting our citizens in Georgia. So this is just a kind of a little effort to make sure we're taking care of those that are in public housing. As I mentioned, we've got the reciprocity issues that we're dealing with some of our surrounding states, and we're going to honor those that are have a license in another state that are coming into Georgia, that are visitors to Georgia, that if they have a carry permit in their home state, we want to recognize it. I don't know if many of y'all remember last year, y'all probably saw in the news media like myself, you know, everybody that has a carry permit in Georgia or weapons permit in Georgia, They do that through their local county probate office usually. Well, in the Northeast, there was a section, I think probably a lot of y'all may have looked on the Google Maps and been able to identify where every carry permit holder was. I believe it was in New York or New Jersey. And I think that's just an abuse of the information, and one of the things that kind of puts a lot of people at risk in that regard. So there's a prohibition in here about compiling that data and using that data, disseminating it. The only thing that we're going to do with this is to make sure that those probate court records are confidential. If you'll see that in Section 4. When you start moving through, and Senator Barry Loudermilk had a bill during the last session, and we're carrying that forward into this bill here. For those members that have served in the military, that are between 18 and 21, that are either active military or have been discharged from the military with anything other than dishonorable, we want to make sure that because those individuals have had more training, and really those that serve and putting their life on the line and serving in the military, we think that they've shown a much greater propensity for maturity. And in doing that, we feel like that they ought to be able to have a weapons carry permit. So if you look in the completion of lines 114 through 122, you'll see that. The last thing that this bill does, and it's one that I guess you say repeat and repeat. Currently, if you're a firearms dealer in Georgia, when you look, you've got to jump through all of the hoops of the federal firearms permit, and a lot of different requirements that are put on by the federal government. And then we turn right back around on the state government and we do that again. And so there's one of the last things that this bill does is to remove that redundancy of a state permit and the state laws that we're doing that are already duplicated in federal law. So we can't change the federal law, but we can change the state law. And so the goal there is just to remove that from the firearms dealers so that they're not having to double up on their efforts of keeping the bureaucracy of government. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to address particular questions as you go through the bill, but it's a pretty simple bill. It's been a combination of several different things, and I think that it does a good job of protecting the Second Amendment rights of our citizens in Georgia.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. You know, this is a little bit lighter than what we've been used to carrying for the last month or so.
Yeah.
So, sure would like to thank you. Now, any of the committee members have any questions of the senator before we open this up for public discussion? Is this you? Representative Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this. Overall, I like your bill. I do have some concerns, if I can take you to line 122, on a discussion of conditions other than honorable. I had 34 years with the United States Marine Corps active in reserve, and I can tell you we discharged people that certainly showed a greater a lack of maturity that had discharges other than honorable. We used to have undesirable. We had several other levels. They may have changed it since I got out, which would cause me concern. We got them out of the Marine Corps and not under honorable conditions. I have no problem with that if it said he got an honorable discharge or maybe even a medical discharge, as long as the medical discharge wasn't for mental problems that person had. So I'd like to talk to you offline about that a little bit if we got a little time.
Be glad
and maybe help you. Overall, like your bill. Like your bill, just might want to. And if I could ask you about line 109, the state shall be prohibited from creating or maintaining a database of information regarding persons issued weapons carry license. I'm a little unsure as to what if a police officer stops a person who's got a concealed weapon permit, shows that permit to them, is there a process or a database currently out there, and we've got some police officers here, I know the colonel with our state patrol is here, maybe he could tell us, where they can verify that that permit is current and how that process works?
My understanding of current law is right now they have to go back to the probate court where that permit was issued. And what we're spelling out in this particular section is that we still want them to go back to that probate court, to the judge that issued that license. And you can imagine the sensitivity of who has permits and who doesn't, and the misuse of that transpired in the Northeast this past year. We want to try to protect our citizens' rights and their identity, and who may have a carry permit and who may not. I guess when I look at the city of Kennesaw, said they reported this. Y'all probably saw this a few weeks ago, that they've had the lowest crime rate they've ever had. Said and they attribute that to the fact that they have a ordinance on their books of requiring all of their citizens to have a firearm. And I don't know if there's anything to that or not, but I can tell you that when I look at, we want to make sure that information is not abused.
Was any thought given, and this is my last question, Mr. Chairman, was any thought given to simply exempting that from Open Records Act reporting, where it could not be released to newspapers and that sort of thing? We had one I carried for an anti-terrorism law that exempted names of police officers and their home addresses that had gone to Israel to study counterterrorism. I didn't know if that was discussed or considered. This
follows in that same train of thought. It's right in that same idea. This just creates it from being assimilated. One of the first things you do is assimilate the data, and then you distribute it. Well, this makes sure that it doesn't get assimilated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. Just one question. I had was looking at line 85, and it talks about public housing on line 85.
Yes, sir.
Is there any reason that we're singling them out of targeting this group? Has there been any problems?
None that I'm aware of in Georgia. One of the things that when we think about the residents in public housing, typically they're lower income and have the least propensity to be able to protect their civil rights. Whether that would be the Second Amendment or any other, by hiring an attorney and taking issues to court. And what we want to do is make sure that we're protecting those people that are living in public housing, that those rights are not infringed. And this spells it out very easily. And I'll be honest, I've had a lot of favorable comments from some of the housing directors that I've worked with in the past, that they all subscribe to the same policy in their placement right now. So I haven't had any problems with anybody in public housing in Georgia, but I do understand that there are some places across the country that have had an issue and maybe have tried to take away some folks' Second Amendment rights, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen in Georgia. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question, and it's mostly so I can make an informed judgment on this. On lines 93 and 94, with respect to the reciprocity issue, I haven't done a survey of other state laws. Can you give us a sense of are other state laws similar to ours in terms of the licensing requirements?
My understanding from working with the National Rifle Association, and I've asked maybe Raymond White to address a little bit more in detail, but I believe there's and there's a push. There's right now currently 8 states that have done this, and they're trying to move across the country, and so that we do, in essence, have a national right to carry by doing this, so that we honor, if they're licensed in their home state, their state of residence, they come to Georgia, that we honor those that have a carry permit in their home state. And that could be for anybody that could be traveling through Georgia. One of the things I welcome people to Georgia. I'm the chair of economic development and tourism for our Senate, and when we look, I think that's a very important thing that we do.
Okay, thank you.
If I might ask a question on that issue there. How many states recognize Georgia carry permits? Do we have any states that don't recognize Georgia that we're fixing to recognize them?
Currently, as you know, right across the river from you, said in South Carolina, and it's very unfortunate for me. We share a lot of the same constituents that, for whatever reason, South Carolina has not honored our Georgia permit. Said and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Senator Lee Bright, but I've been working with him and some others in South Carolina to see what we can do about getting recognition in South Carolina. That's one of the adjacent states that doesn't recognize our permit. So that was where the original intention of my bill started, and we want to try to make sure that we move that forward.
Any idea what the sticking point is, the reason they won't recognize Georgia carry?
I think there was more of one personality that's no longer in their Senate, so I'm hoping that's going to remedy itself shortly.
So those of us who live on the state line that go over there occasionally might actually not be the criminals if we're carrying our guns over there?
That's what my hope is, sir.
All right. Representative Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill. I do think it has a lot of really good things in it. I want to follow up on a couple of things, line 85 to 87, talking about in the public housing. And it uses the word any lawful possession. So if a person is under 21, they still can't. It's not giving them a free ticket anywhere. What about an illegal immigrant that's here?
Well, they're by definition illegal.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Yes, ma'am.
So it still does not apply. And would they need to have any kind of a concealed weapon permit? Do they need to have one of those to have it in the house?
Well, and obviously not in their home. The Georgia law allows for you to have a firearm in your home.
Right.
This is, and you think about, and I use Senator James when this came onto the floor discussion. I said, put yourself in the case of a resident that has to live in public housing that may need some assistance that way, and would you want your rights taken away? She admitted on the Senate floor that she was had a carry permit and she was a carrier, and I said, well, okay, now put yourself in public housing, and do you want to lose that right? So I
agree with that. Now, again, going back to who can, a felon still can't. They're there.
Correct.
Nobody that can't have one, we're not opening it up. My other question had to do with the reciprocal agreements. Are we going to go to knock on every other state and say, okay, we're doing this, are you going to open up to us? Have we got some plan, a grand plan to do that?
Well, in working with some of our partners, like the National Rifle Association, we want to try to have every state recognize every other state, and doing that.
We will do that as part of a program through NRA or whatever organization is out there. I'm very interested in doing that because I do drive up and down between North Carolina and Florida, and you do want to be prepared and you don't want to be crossing lines where you shouldn't. And South Carolina is one that has been an issue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members? My gosh, if we just wore this dog out in the last 5 weeks, this just seems like lightweight material compared to 512, doesn't it? Now, do we have, Senator, do you have anyone else with you? I notice that we have the NRA representative here. Does he wish to address this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Raymond White with the National Rifle Association. We'd like to thank Senator Ginn for bringing this important piece of legislation. I think he's done a good job kind of going over the highlights of it. To answer a couple of the questions on the reciprocity issue, we are looking at this as a national initiative to try to pass this similar bills in multiple states. We've tried for several years to pass national right to carry in Congress. That's just not going to happen given the political dynamics in Washington. So if enough states pass this, which is what we call full recognition, then basically you've created a national right to carry around the country. So right now, about 6 or 7 states have this language on the books, and we're making it a priority by the NRA to pass it in multiple states. And as Representative Atwood's question, as it related to the discharge, we would certainly be happy to work with you on some language. I'd heard that a couple people had mentioned that over on the Senate side when the bill was over there as well. So we'd welcome any language or suggestions you might have on how to kind of tighten that up. That was just clearly simply an oversight. And I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
I think you're going to have a few.
Okay.
Representative Atwood?
Just one suggestion, Mr. Chairman. By the way, I am a proud NRA member.
Well, thank you.
And I do support
helps me
you.
each month.
One suggestion I might have, and just for the gentleman to consider, also if you could look at line 20, and I might be willing to offer this as a friendly amendment. My concern floats around, you have bad conduct discharges, you have other than dishonorable and medical and problems like that. One suggestion might be a friendly amendment of current active service in the United States military or the United States Coast Guard, or actually on line 21, excuse me, or proof of discharge from the armed forces or Coast Guard under honorable or general conditions, period. Striking other than dishonorable. That captures 2 that I know are not a problem. Obviously, a person gets out with an honorable discharge, they deserve something. Same thing with general in most circumstances. Some of the others can be problematic on occasion, not saying all the people can ultimately get a right to carry when they reach 21, but given the special dispensation that we're giving our young people that serve in the military, that might be something worth considering. Give you a moment to think about it, and that was just something that came to mind as I was sitting here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Now, this is a tame crowd today. All right, if y'all will just stay there in case we have some other questions. We only have one, as anyone else, there's only one person signed up to speak. John Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Monroe from GeorgiaCarry.org. Georgia Carry supports Senate Bill 101, so I won't go into a lot of detail. I do have just a couple of comments on it. One, there has been some discussion on public housing, and just for the edification of the members, there was a time in not too long ago history that the Atlanta Housing Authority actually had a regulation prohibiting carrying guns in their properties, and one of our members who was a resident there brought it to our attention, and we contacted the Housing Authority and pointed out that that's probably not constitutional and that we would sue them if they wouldn't remove the ordinance or the regulation, and they did. So I'm not aware of other housing authorities in Georgia that have that, but it has happened in Georgia to some extent. On the question of reciprocity, I can fill in a couple of numbers. Approximately 26 states currently recognize Georgia licenses, and the current Georgia law is that Georgia will recognize any other state's license that recognizes Georgia, so we recognize those same other states. The rest of the states are about half divided between not having any recognition or reciprocity with anybody. That would be states like California and New York. They just don't recognize permits from anywhere else. And then about half of the other states have some reciprocity, but because of their particular reciprocity law, have not recognized Georgia's permits. And I don't think that would change based on the bill. And finally, on the topic of the database, again, we support that provision. But one thing I'd point out or make an observation, perhaps ask a question, is under the current Georgia law, we've gone from a local issuance of the physical license from the probate judge to a statewide vendor that is producing all of the licenses. And we've actually had some concern about that at Georgia Carry. We think maybe that is creating a de facto database in the vendor because that vendor is producing all of the licenses. So I'm not sure how this bill would change that. We'd like to see some kind of mechanism where the vendor is not permitted to maintain a database. In other words, after it creates the physical license and sends it back to the probate judge, that the information is destroyed at the vendor so that the vendor can't use it to create a database, which I think is what the spirit of the bill is. That's all the comments I have. I'd be happy to answer your questions if there are.
Very good. Do we have any questions of Mr. Monroe? Wait, Ms. Waits?
Wait, yes, I had a question. I guess I'm directing this to the senator. What is the problem with creating the database for law enforcement purposes and making sure that it's not used for the unintended purpose?
Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what happened in, and I believe it was New Jersey. Did you see?
Yes, I did.
New York said
Yes, I did.
you know, all it takes is somebody to misuse the data, and so by preempting the formulation of that data into a database, said you're stopping it in its tracks.
But couldn't it possibly be beneficial in law enforcement purposes for that reason? In some cases, to have that data.
Well, there's such a thing as could be, and it also could be used in a negative way. So I think there's more risk that come about for the honest Georgia citizen that has a carry permit than there is reward. So we're not worried about when you look at who gets a carry permit in Georgia, those are the law-abiding citizens. The ones that I'm worried about are those that don't have a carry permit. Those that are already under the guise of the law. So what I want to try to do is make sure that we write laws for those people that follow them, and we want to make sure that we don't abuse those people that we're here to represent. And I know you can appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to add a comment.
Certainly.
Formerly, the license in Georgia, the physical license was pretty rudimentary. It was literally a Word document that was printed out by the probate judge on a sheet of plain white copy paper. 3 years ago, the legislature changed that so that now it's really a very sophisticated license. I'm not an expert on counterfeiting, but by my inspection, it looks to be more sophisticated than the state driver's licenses. Anyway, I've never heard of an instance where one is counterfeited or anything like that. So I think while theoretically it might be convenient for law enforcement to have a database to verify one, I'm not sure as a practical matter if there's any need.
Mr. Hightower.
Mr. Monroe, do you have any language that to suggest or give us suggestions that would accomplish what you're talking about and have those vendors delete that information or get rid of that information once the cards are done?
Representative Hightower, I haven't created any. I think it'd be a pretty simple matter to add a paragraph D, and I'd be happy to supply some to the committee or to the author.
Okay.
One of the things I might add in here is if you look at on line 109 where it says the state shall be prohibited, the vendor, I believe, signs a confidentiality agreement with the state. On that, I'm not sure, but so when we say the state's prohibited and the vendor has a confidentiality, the vendor would, and we'll check that out. But I do appreciate the concern.
Good. Representative Atwood.
Going back to line 104 through line 113, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. Due with the proliferation of people that have a cottage industry of falsifying various IDs, I can envision a situation where if we did not have a place to go, that once a good citizen goes to the trouble of getting an ID, and then I have others that are wanting to just manufacture these things and pass them out to people that are maybe felons and others, that we may need a confidential, and I want this confidential, I absolutely do, and I'm more than happy to attach criminal penalties to anyone that releases it to the public, but that database somewhere, whether it's maintained locally by the probate judge or on the state level, somewhere where law enforcement could go to it and look at it and verify that this person who's manufacturing these things, which they do all the time. I had a $5,000 fraud perpetrated on me manufacturing my driver's license in a place I had never even been, and went in and did that and cheated me out of money and a credit card, and I'm still trying to figure out how that happened to this day. And so I want it maintained. I'm just concerned that law enforcement has no way to go and verify if the good citizen is being cheated, and some criminal is running around with a Georgia carry, and he's a felon or something, that somebody manufactured a false card for him. That's what I'm trying to wrap my brain around here. Oh. Not trying to fight you. I'm trying to perfect it. That's all.
Representative Atwood, just to be clear, the probate judge does presumably maintain a database. Mm-hmm. The judge keeps a record of his or her own acts and could verify an individual license. I think what the bill primarily addresses is creating some kind of statewide database, merging the 159 counties worth of information.
I have absolutely no problem with that as long as the judge maintains it. My concern was, and I wasn't clear on it, that I would like to see a criminal violation for anybody that released this. If you release this, a clerk, someone like that, to other than law enforcement, other than someone that had a need to know, and told everybody in the public where people who had guns were, like they did, I have absolutely no problem putting a friendly amendment on there too to help you with it. So,
very good. Mr. Hightower.
If I'm reading this, on line 111 it says, the judge of the probate court of each county shall be authorized to verify only the legitimacy and the validity of a weapons carry license. Right now, according to what you're saying and what I thought to be true, is the probate judges do keep a list of who has these licenses. And so my fear would be the same as yours on a statewide database. But right now, if we have someone who is saying that they legitimately have this license, we could go back to the probate court, and the probate judge would then be able to, which this says, shall not be authorized to provide any further information regarding license, but the probate judge would then be able to tell law enforcement, yes, this person was in fact the person that has this license. So we could verify that through the probate court's records. And I believe that's what you're saying is why we don't have the need for the state database. Is that correct?
That's right. And in fact, there's a provision that's not reproduced in the bill, but in an existing code, if a person's license is lost or stolen, there's a provision for the person to go back to the probate judge that issued it and get it replaced, and presumably without having to go through the whole application process again, the probate judge would have to be able to check his or her own records to make sure that that person actually had one and create a new one and issue it to him.
Very good. Any other questions of the committee? No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your comments, and appreciate you coming in and supporting another Second Amendment group's legislation. All right. Not that I can tell. Ms. Waits, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just voice support for Chairman Atwood's friendly amendment with respect to honorable discharge. As you may recall, a few years ago, we had a gentleman who was a decorated military official, the DC sniper. It's my understanding that he probably did have a permit. And this is an example of where we have some individuals who may have had some challenges after leaving the military. So I just simply wanted to go on record with my support for an honorable discharge.
Now, any other questions from the committee? Do we have anyone else that did not sign up that wishes to be heard, either for or against? Representative Atwood?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm asking more questions than I normally ask. I'm just trying to help here. On line 111, my concern was, and I finally discussed it with Representative Hightower, is right now I'm looking at the judge of the probate court shall be authorized to verify. I'm concerned about the judge's staff. one thing that I would like you to consider, the judge or the judge's staff, or a prohibition there, some prohibition. I don't want anybody in that office releasing this information other than what you have spelled out in there. And other people have access to this other than just the judge. And I can see a little bit of a hole in there if we didn't have some wording to specify the folks that have access other than the judge to this database. And I'm sure there's others. I mean, in my probate court, we have about 5 or 6 people that are working there, and all of them do work in this particular area if someone comes in to sign up for it. So just something to think about, food for thought.
Representative Taylor.
Thank you. The more we talk about this, the more we find. I see where you're going with that. The judge or the person in their office would be authorized. Who are they going to tell it to? Are you going to say that this is open to the newspaper, to the TV? Is there some way to limit it so it only be for a court order or through if the police call? Or can it be any Johnny-come-lately that calls and I want to know if so-and-so has a... I mean, there needs to be a need-to-know basis, not just a nosy neighbor wanting to know if my neighbor next door has a gun. Are we going to limit who can get that information? I would not... I have a license to carry, and I don't want that advertised. I don't want it in the paper. I don't see why there would be a need to know for my neighbor to know. Are they going to release it to just anybody?
Quite honestly, I think we're getting a little far down into the weeds,
okay.
but that's okay. I appreciate the
Senator, I understand y'all don't perfect as much stuff in the Senate as we do in the House, but we don't mind getting into the weeds.
You know, and when we go back up to line 106, said the all records and information regarding persons issued weapon carry licenses maintained by the judge, the probate court shall be confidential. Said you know, as we look at that,
right.
then come down to the if there's a, you know, when you're trying to verify that a license is valid. First off, the person has to have knowledge that you have a license, and so if there's a law enforcement individual that you know said, hey, we you know, do you have a permit for that? I think it would maybe reading in between the lines, we're saying that goes back to a law enforcement agency that would have that request, but it may be that, you know, if you want to get it down to particulars, we'll carry this as far down as you want to go.
It may be covered because it does say in that section A, you know. But again, it's like in between the lines. I just want to make sure it's for a need-to-know basis and not just anybody can walk in and get confidential information.
And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good. Now, do we have any other questions? Last chance for anybody who wishes to be heard. Yes, ma'am. Did we finally hit on a point that got your attention?
No, I just got my courage up enough. My name is Laura Bordeaux, and I'm just here as a private citizen trying to learn about these issues. I had a couple of questions, one of which is how long, let's say a law enforcement officer has a question about a permit and might be concerned that it could be a forgery. How long would it take for that information to get back from the probate judge, especially if it was like on a weekend, something like that?
That would be up to the individual courts.
Well, that's not exactly what I meant. If it's on a weekend and, you know, there's a concern about this, they wouldn't be able to find out until, let's say, Monday. So in that case, it just seems like a possible problem.
Well, and I guess the easiest way for me to address that would be, let's just say that there was an incident where a law enforcement officer decided that you know you had violated the law. Mm-hmm. All he's going to do is he's going to have one more charge that he's going to you know, if you don't have a valid permit, that's going to be another charge. He's not going, you know, law enforcement doesn't go out and stop people, said they and check a weapons permit unless there's a problem somewhere.
I see.
So when you try to address this, you know, if you don't have a valid permit, said that would be one of the things that they would follow up on with it. But it's not going to be one of those things that, we're just going to stop people going down the road and say, hey, do you have a valid permit or not? There's going to be a cause of action in that case.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, and this is really coming from basic ignorance, is it true that South Carolina has training provisions in their permits that we don't have? In other words, does Georgia have requirements for training and continuing practice and all that for holders?
Georgia does not. Georgia does not have a training requirement as a condition of licensure.
So if I wanted to get a license, I would never have to learn how to use my weapon if I chose not to learn.
Wouldn't be advisable, but yes.
Of course,
that's
yes,
correct.
of course. Okay, but South Carolina does have such requirements?
My understanding is that they do have a requirement
Okay.
for training in South Carolina.
In other words, that might be one of the reasons that they choose not to recognize Georgia's permits? It's just
Could be.
a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Hightower.
Ma'am, and I mean this with the utmost respect, and I greatly appreciate any citizen that is willing to come up here and take part in this process. We need more citizens to do that, so I applaud you for coming here and doing that. With South Carolina, I believe some of their issues for not recognizing our carry license because we don't require training. And I can tell you, from my perspective, and as long as I'm in this seat, I care less what South Carolina recognizes or not. If they're going to require us to get training to carry guns, I don't care if they ever recognize our license, if that's what it's going to take to get them to do it. Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. It needs to stay that way. It does not have a requirement that you be proficient. It just says that you have the right to carry arms.
Thank you. Any other questions now? We're getting toward the end of this, since this has been for hearing only. I want to thank the Georgia Carry folks for speaking in favor of this bill that I think is obviously is an NRA bill. Mr. White,
That would be accurate.
I need to ask a question. Did NRA and did y'all like 512?
Yes, we support. We support.
Well, I
pro-gun
noticed
legislation.
that y'all were notably absent during all the hours of testimony, but thank you. And it warms my heart to know that we have all of the Second Amendment groups, with maybe some of the outcast groups, that are all in favor of this, of the process. And I appreciate you being here today.
We decided to split it up this year. They chose a path, and we.
Senator, again, I'm going to recommend that you meet with Representative Atwood. He is our legal scholar, to maybe work out some language on that deals with the probate judge language, so that when this committee meets to pass this bill forward. And I did ask you, you like this 512 too, don't you,
I'm with
Senator?
you, Coach. You are my state rep.
You are one of my 3 senators in the bane of my life.
Yeah, but you are my state rep.
Listen, good bill, and thank you. And if there's no other comments, this meeting is over.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.